What's up, guys? Snap here. Got a bit of a long one for you here today. First, I'm going to quickly tackle the manifesto and all of the relevant changes that we read and how it affects various party members. After quickly going over the manifesto, we have a grand total of 13 POBs to go over today. There's a lot to go over. Once again, there's timestamps down in the description, but let's jump right into it. Pretty early on in the manifesto here, we have a change to spell suppression. Basically, they shifted the spell suppression burden on gear over to the passive tree. This actually benefits a lot of the builds. A lot of the builds we have gear constraints, and we do have extra passive points. This indirectly buffs builds like the Culler, who are already pathing to suppression wheels here, and as well as over here in Scion. You're gonna need a lot less points on the tree in order to get suppression capped, so that's just a direct buff. We didn't really have a ton of people that had suppression on gear anyways, so this should just be a clean buff to what we were doing already, which is taking a bunch of suppression on the tree. Moving on to the first big hit of the party, which was Defiance Banner. Now, this got pretty much destroyed. However, it is still very much worth using. 24% armor and evasion before aura scaling is still quite good. So you definitely want to have this somewhere in the party, definitely on the Aurabot or either the minor support. But now it makes a little less sense to try and jam in Defiance Banner on everybody else for a little bit of personal tankiness when they're outside of aura range. TLDR on Defiance Banner is you still probably use it on the Aurabot to give it to everybody else, but you probably don't run it on everybody to increase their personal tankiness because they do have a bit more of a struggle getting in their own mana reservation efficiency because it was nerfed on the tree or the mastery. So yeah, you still run it on the Aurabot and just drop it on everybody else. As we all know, there were a bunch of minion changes in the manifesto. The one thing that we were concerned about was our Animate Guardian health pool. We are tentatively watching how strong Animate Guardians are and whether or not you can get the tankiness for the same amount of investment. The Animate Guardian's life pool is a concern. We can easily shift off some of the items it was wearing before, such as Kingmaker, onto other characters. So that's just one thing to keep in mind with all the minion changes. Maybe your AG isn't as survivable as before. It's just something to keep in mind. A little further down the manifesto, we got the nerfs to Detonate Dead. They finally took the Auric Champion and the Auric Colossus and brought that down to the life of other corpses. So it's a pretty big nerf. That with the nerf to Corpse Pact actually made this skill a lot less competitive. Seismic Trap did get a bit of a nerf, but it is honestly still better than everything else. Nothing comes close. So if you're trying to level something, get it to like level 95 or something with Seismic Trap, and then you can respec to whatever you want. Now, the big change here that affected the party was obviously the change to the Reservation Mastery that granted 15% increased mana reservation efficiency of skills has been removed. Just completely got removed. On top of that, the life reservation efficiency went from 30 down to 20. Now, obviously this has implications for the Aurabot and how you want to build the reservation, as well as some of the other characters have a little bit more of a stretch to try and fit everything in, but it's all completely doable and is honestly not that big of a change. That was honestly kind of the big changes here from the manifesto. Not a ton of stuff has changed. However, we have made a lot of adjustments to the builds here, including the ones that were affected by the reservation changes. We've also made some slight adjustments to the build, so there are 13 of them. Let's jump it right into the Vaal BB carry that we are probably going to be playing again next league. Now, the fan favorite Nebulous Stacker is going to have two major changes to it. And the first major change is shifting Badge of the Brotherhood to Marilyn's Fallacy. Now, these are both very strong amulet choices. The Badge of the Brotherhood typically provides a little bit more defense because you get elusive effect from all of the frenzy charges that you get. And in turn, that elusive effect just gives you straight damage avoidance from hits, which is very strong and something that we really value in a party. However, the thing that made us jump from Badge of the Brotherhood to Marilyn's Fallacy is the Eldritch Altar mod. So here is a list of all of the Eldritch mods that are currently in the game, and the one that has prompted this change right here is reduced defenses per frenzy charge. We want to be able to click every single altar downside without having to look at it, and while most of them are manageable without any extra investment, this one in particular, when you click it with the frenzy charges, just absolutely makes you fall over instantly, especially when you have 7 frenzy charges. Imagine you click the altar, 350% reduced defenses, that is just an insta-death. So we wanted to remove frenzy charges entirely from the equation and make it so that we can do every single altar downside on the Eldritch side. The way you do that is to obviously switch to the next best amulet, which we believe is Marilyn's Fallacy. It is a gigantic amount of damage, doesn't need frenzy charges to rely on damage. You can still very easily crit cap even with Marilyn's and the brittle nerf, so this one just made sense. Now, as a result of losing the frenzy charges, obviously there is an interaction with the military Militant Faith, where you can get Inner Conviction to convert all of your frenzy charges into power charges, and then you get more spell damage per power charge. You're basically sacrificing a little bit of damage from the more multiplier from the frenzy charges, and then you're going to 3% on the spell damage per power charge. So it's a pretty good trade-off. It's worth the investment here on the Militant Faith. You can also get some stats from it, specifically Ellie Res, or you can get Aura Effect. You can even get non-curse ailments. You can get a ton of stuff here that's useful. So just look for one, and then obviously make sure it's dominated by the right god. And then basically you can forego frenzy charges entirely and simply click any of the altar positives that you want without having to look at any of the downsides. Because the worst thing in the world is when you do see a unique dupe or a quant rarity altar and you can't click it because you see reduced defenses per frenzy charge. So this adjustment circumvents all of that, and it lets us do every single altar mod in the game. Now, one other thing in the manifesto here was that the brittle cap got nerfed from 15 to 6. It is now a little bit harder to cap your crit, especially with Maryland's. So here I put a 6 brittle cap. We've had to change the pathing a little bit to grab a little bit of additional crit on the tree, mainly arcane potency. Additionally, we put in a pure talent jewel here, which gives us a little bit of base crit. Additionally, we have changed our southbound corruption from plus levels over to spell crit. Just helps a little bit hitting that crit cap, make it feel really comfortable. One other adjustment here as a result of the brittle nerfs is probably to switch crit damage support here for increased critical strikes. But the multi you get from going to Maryland's more than makes up for that. You actually come out with a little bit more multi than you had before. So this is definitely the way to go. Just swap the support gem, grab a little bit more on the tree, switch your corruptions. These are all really easy adjustments. You still hit the 100% crit, and that should be most of the main adjustments that we've done from last league to this Vaal BV character. Everything else should be pretty familiar. 2 Nebuluses, 2 Call of the Brotherhood, got some southbound so you don't kill stuff. Tree's very cookie cutter. Got some AoE on the Vast Power Magnifier mediums. This should be all very simple, all stuff you've seen before. Moving on to the Aurabot. So I have split the Aurabot into 3 distinct phases. The first phase of your Aurabot is obviously when you're life-based and you're just running like 3, maybe 4 auras, and it's really scuffed. But the first true Aurabot you're going to be running is a Covenant Aurabot. It is the easiest to put together. It is the easiest to get the mana reservation efficiency on. So this is your true first phase of the Aurabot. After you phase out of that, you're going to be putting on a Redeemer chest, and you're still going to be using a coruscating elixir at that point. You have that Redeemer chest to push a little bit more of the overcap, and this is kind of like the late game version that you're striving to get to. Third and last phase of your Aurabot is going to be CI, where you get voices and you're just investing as much as you can. I'm including this here so you guys can kind of see what a max investment Aurabot can look like if you really just want to dump more and more money into it, but it's kind of unnecessary. Probably stop here at this point where you get the Redeemer chest and you get the 89.90 overcap. It's completely doable for all content, but I'm including this version for people that want to see here what a max investment character can look like. So getting into the Covenant Aurabot here, one quick thing is I'm simulating the nerfs here to efficiency here. I put 10% reduced life reservation efficiency of skills in the custom modifiers, and then additionally I just simply unspec'd the mana reservation efficiency up here, so it's as if it wasn't there, and that should be simulating all of the reservation efficiency on all of the characters. So with the loss of the mana reservation efficiency mastery, one super easy adjustment you can make is to just incorporate a large cluster jewel. It can be 8 passives. You don't even necessarily need the veteran defender here. You're not really having a great shield on anyways. So you can honestly just get any 8 passive large with just whatever stats you want. Attributes is probably best. And then you can path to it and put in your cluster jewels here. I currently have 25% cluster jewels in all 3 of the sockets. However, with this particular arrangement, you do need to put a different configuration in your Covenant so that it all fits. You have a 50 aura, a 50 aura, a 35, and a 10. All of that fits in the Covenant, so you're going to need 3 off colors. Now, this version with Covenant can only bring you to about 87 overcap before you have to make significant adjustments to how the build is structured. A big chunk of your aura effect is obviously coming from the uniques, including Wakatuki. You also have a Jinx Juju on. You also have the patented Militant Faith as well as Unnatural Instinct. This combo is super good. Still highly recommend. Since you are still wearing a Jinx Juju at this point, you actually don't need to have a +1 scepter equipped, so you can actually move back to Sign of the Sin Eater, fan favorite in the past, giving yourself a super beefy smite. You do need to look for 2 life reservation efficiency rings here. These are catalysted, although it's not completely mandatory to catalyst them. Everything still fits without them. You can either look for fractured bases or just unrolled bases. Especially if you're trying to just fit everything early, you can spend maybe like 1020C on these bases. They're not super expensive, especially if they're not on a great base. This current setup, you are able to fit everything in, all of the important auras, including the purities, Defiance, Determ, Haste, everything is in here. One thing to mention here is about a blessing setup here that you can utilize. At this level of investment, you probably aren't abusing the Vaal Soul Gain Prevention Sextant, and that means you're not going to be able to abuse Vaal Clarity to cast your blessing. One question I do get asked a lot is how I'm casting my Zealotry when I'm streaming, and the answer is another teammate is giving me Vaal Clarity. Now, this isn't super relevant for a lot of people because they aren't running the Sextant or they're in a boss encounter or something and they can't use that Sextant. So one way you can get the Zealotry up with blessing is to actually get so much reduced mana cost so that you can actually cast the blessing. There's a few sources to get it. One of them is here is on Insightfulness, where you get 10% reduced mana cost when you have full ES. You can get it over here on Dreamer Wheel. The only downside to that is it's outside of the Militant Faith area. I mean, you can still get to 100% if you just take this here with the Mastery, and then also you roll a Flask Suffix, which is a craft, and then you put an Enkindling Orb on it for effect. All of that together gives you 100% reduced mana cost of skills. And what you can do is you push the Flask, and then you can push your aura. The aura will turn on. You wait for the Flask to end, and then you can recast your Flask and then turn the aura on or refresh it if you want. Kind of a budget option, and it is something you can do if you're not using the Sextant, or if you're doing a boss encounter or a Simulacrum. It is something you can look into using. Just know that microwing a Enkindling Orb Flask is a bit tedious, especially when you have to push the blessing afterwards, but it is probably the cheapest way to try and get the blessing online early on when you don't have the Sextant. But yeah, overall, Covenant Orbot, very solid, very cheap. This will bring you to basically all content minus like the craziest 5-orb deli. But if you're looking to take your Aurabot build to the next step where you're just juicing as hard as you can, you probably want to make a few upgrades, and the next evolution of that would be to equip Ashes. Now, pushing the next overcap breakpoints from 87 to 89 involve you dropping your Covenant chest piece and replacing it with a Redeemer Regalia. Now, obviously, you're going to need a lot more reservation efficiency in the form of Ashes, which is a top tier unique for Aurabots. It is irreplaceable, best in slot. This is what you should be striving to get for your Aurabot. Skyforce is mandatory for this particular version. I understand if people don't like it, but I honestly think it feels fine, especially if you're using the Lockout Sextant. Constant Vault Discipline is more than enough recovery for you in those maps. Having Skyforce on so that you can push the overcap using an Arrogance in this setup here, definitely worth it in my opinion. Once you put on the Ashes, you get +1. You need to get another +1 from another source, mainly a Scepter, and that gives you your +2 so that all of your purities go from 21 to 23. Level 23 is where they gain an additional breakpoint so that you're getting an extra max res. And those are kind of the main gearing changes that you're going to have from your first phase of an Aurabot to the second. You should think of it as pre-Ashes and post-Ashes Aurabot. So you should probably have a Jinx Juju and a Covenant on until you can afford an Ashes. And then once you have the Ashes, you should immediately try to craft your Regalia. Try and go from 87 to 89 overcap. It is a big jump. Additionally, all of the alt qualities, specifically on Determination, Defiance Banner, almost double your armor. Not to mention other abusable alt qualities like Phantasmal Smite, which gives you a bunch of attack and cast speed, as well as the new Rejuvenation Totem can be very useful for bossing. That alt quality abuse is where Ashes really shine. This particular setup, everything fits. It is a tight squeeze. You do have 2% unreserved life and 5 unreserved mana. There is one expensive part to going with a Redeemer chest with Arrogance. In order to fit all the purities on it, you do need a 4 Enlight, or you need to have a +1 int chest with a level 3 Enlighten. I think the cost of those is probably pretty similar. So you can use a +1 int chest or +1 support chest, or you can use a level 4 Enlighten. You can kind of see why there's a big price gap between those two builds. Obviously, you're adding on a new chest piece with Ashes with an Enlighten, and you get from 87 to 89, which is why you see a lot of people stop specifically at 87 overcap for a while they try and accrue the rest of the gear, push their Aurabot to be able to afford Ashes. In order to fit everything in with all of the reservation changes, you do have to pick up a third reservation efficiency cluster here. Now, this looks kind of stupid, right? You have a third cluster jewel out here with the armor, and then you might say to yourself, well, why don't you just get a Voices? It's actually the same amount of passive points to do this with a 5 passive Voices, because you're pathing down a Divine Shield and Sanctum of Thought anyways. If you're grabbing these anyways, it's actually the same exact amount of passive points to drop this and just get a Voices. So it does look stupid, but it is actually the same exact amount of points as a 5 passive Voices. Probably the target price point you're going for anyways. And So just fitting in 3 large cluster jewels with 35 effect, probably what you're going to want to do at this stage. One thing to talk about here is the new Vaal Caress gloves that were teased on Monday evening. I think that these gloves are now best in slot for Aurabot unless you have a crazy like +4 or +5 Hands of the High Templar. I've simulated this here on a rare. I've also corrupted it for +2. I believe this unique to be fairly common. It is quite low level. There's probably going to be a ton of these in the game circulating, and getting a single corruption for +2 probably isn't that unreasonable. Now, what you can do with this particular slot is you put all of your Vaal auras in here: Discipline, Haste, Grace, Duration, which doesn't really scale super high with levels, so this is probably going to be level 15 because it gets -5 from the unique, and this is going to bring your discipline up to level 29. If you happen to get a 2120 Vaal discipline, it will be level 30, which is absolutely massive. This is providing a ton of ES to everybody in your party. It scales super well, and if you happen to get a +4 corruption, you can even get a level 32 discipline, which is going to be absolutely crazy. We don't know what the post 20 scaling of Vaal haste is going to be, but the post 20 scaling on regular haste is surely going to be a bit better than what it is now, and so you should be able to use that to get a level 29 haste. This is going to be super powerful. I think it's best in slot right now unless you have some like really crazy Hands of the High Templar. So this is definitely something to look out for, is these new unique gloves. Basically, the only thing that changed here was costs went up a little bit. You also have to take a new cluster jewel here to get as much reservation efficiency as you had before. The build is basically identical to what it was lastly. With the addition of a level 4 Enlighten here, you can jam everything in on life. It still fits. Yeah, let's move on to the CI Aurabot that we have here. This is my friend Dodo's character. He likes to invest a lot more into his Aurabots. Keep in mind that all of this investment past what I showed you in the regular Redeemer chest Aurabot is completely unnecessary. Previous Aurabot can clear all content, all 5 orbs, all Uber bosses, everything, and it'll do everything just fine. This is a build for people who want to just dump as much money into their character as possible. Best way to do that is to obviously equip a Mage Blood and get a bunch of flasks that have effect within Kindling Orb. This gives you life regen and curse immunity, a bunch of armor, and it also gives you a bunch of fucking movement speed. A staple of high-end Aurabots is going to be getting a synthesized Mask of the Tribunal and then int stacking as much as they can. Reason to do this is you get mana reservation efficiency per 250 total attributes, so you can see he has 1100 int, 632 dex, and 361 strength. That's a lot of attributes. This helmet's giving you a lot of efficiency. The int is also going to double and give you a ton of ES, so you're building efficiency and you're getting ES at the same stat. It's super potent. He's going to have a lot of the staple uniques equipped. We have Wakatuki, we've got Ashes, got a Vivinsect in there so that you can put a Discipline inside. You do actually have a lot of leftover mana efficiency here when you put in 2-3 passive voices, so you can definitely afford the reduced reservation efficiency on the Vivinsect. Additionally, this build actually had so much reservation efficiency left over. The mastery change actually did not affect it at all, and everything still fits. It's sitting at a whopping 8k ES, 100k evasion, 155k armor. These are very impressive benchmarks. Obviously, the high-end option for an Aurabot is to drop the Militant Faith and to actually get a Elegant Hubris, try to get 3 notables. There are a few that are good in the duelist spot, and then obviously you'd path down here and just grab Champion of the Cause. There are, however, equally as many good 3 passive superiority notables that are up in Witch. So you can kind of get it either in Witch or in Duelist. Those are 2 very, very good spots to put the Elegant Hubris. QB has a great new feature here that'll let you find Timeless Jewels. If you don't know about it, you can click Find Timeless Jewel, go to Elegant Hubris, you select the socket, and then you can type superiority. It'll find the jewel for you that you're looking for. You can see here in the Witch socket, there are a ton of 3s. And now some of these are going to be more point efficient than others. So you can kind of go through them and look at them and see which one you'd want. But yeah, the gist of going to CI bot is to get a Mask of the Tribunal. You start in stacking. Obviously, these clusters are all insane. 35 effect in all attributes. These are just all crazy. You're getting all that int. Your ES pool is going to receive a huge bump, and you're going to get extra efficiency. It's going to be super easy to fit everything in on mana. Anyways, let's move on to the Cursebot. Cursebot fortunately received no changes in any form. It's still the exact same build. The idea is the same. You grab large cluster jewels with Veteran Defender. Path along the outside here, you grab as many Master of the Maelstroms as you can. Another option you have is to actually stack Enfeeble effect, which is Doedre's Spite. Doedre's Spite gives you Enfeeble effect, which is actually we found to be quite strong. There may or may not be a bug right now with Enfeeble where you can curse them past the cap up all the way up to 100%. And if that somehow slips out of the patch notes, I would recommend dropping some of these Master of the Maelstroms and putting in Enfeeble effect so that the monsters no longer deal damage. But we'll just wait and see on that one. Yeah, other than that, build is exactly the same. You basically get a curse effect from the Doedre's damnings. You put on the Doedre's skin so that you have a bunch of extra curses. It's all pretty easy to put together. There is a better version of the Cursebot that you can run that involves just basically changing all of this to go Blasphemy. The Doedre's version is still super good. You want to have your curses on all the time. There is a Blasphemy version you can pull off with this build. The way you do that is you just reserve everything with Awaken Blasphemy here. You get your max curses from a random corrupted amulet as well as Wind Shriek. You then get one from the tree and one from your Ascendancy. That's enough to run everything you need. You're getting a massive ES pool from being able to run this rare shield with the Veteran Defenders as well as the Regalia. This Regalia is probably a little too good, especially without Recombinators. You're probably not going to be able to make this. You can get something similar and get 10% effective curses on the Implicit, and fitting everything in on Blasphemy is not too hard. It is just a little bit harder to put together. It requires a little bit more investment. Typically, our Cursebot just puts on whatever garbage you can, and that's why it's super easy to just grab all of these unique. This Cursebot is not that much worse than the Blasphemy version. They're just different investment levels. And we're going to move on to the Mana Guardian real quick. A couple changes here to mention with this build. With the advent of the new Timeless Jewel Finder, I think it is very much worth trying to find an Elegant Hubris with pooled resources. This node is super good if you can find any of the jewel sockets you're pathing to with 2 or maybe 3. These are super point efficient. This socket here in Templar is probably best because there are some good mana nodes that you're taking over here in Witch that you probably don't want to delete with a Timeless Jewel. So you can look for them here in the Templar area. It should be good. We still have the Link nodes because Soul Link is so good. One other thing to mention here is we took a different pathing here to go over to Conduit. As we mentioned before when we were talking about the Vaal Blade Vortex Assassin, we no longer want to generate Frenzy charges. The way we were generating charges before was from the Guardian Ascendancy Harmony of Purpose. This made it so everybody shared charges with each other, but also you can get a Power Frenzy or Endurance charge on hit, which unfortunately procced with Tempest Shield. So we would probably be getting Frenzy, Power, and Endurance charges anyways, so we had to switch the Ascendancy. Probably going to take Time of Need just so that the Mana Guardian can have a little bit of personal quality of life where curses aren't affecting him. That does mean he needs to path a little bit differently to come get Conduit. Conduit does work differently than the Guardian Ascendancy node, and it makes it so only the charges that you are generating is shared to everybody, and not the charges that everybody is generating is shared to everybody. This will let him share Endurance charges with an Orloth's Resolve. Everybody in the party still has Endurance charges. Additionally, we did do some math. We did find that these 2 split personality locations are probably going to be best for this. However, if you can't get these into mana split personalities, so you can just take passives on the tree, and it's going to get you pretty much like 90% of the way there. These are just slightly better than the nodes you can take on the tree. Can't get it mana split personalities, just look elsewhere and probably just get nodes on the tree. There's still plenty of mana to take. The other option is to fill it out with cluster jewels. You can just get a Scintillating Idea Large with openness. These are quite good. This is probably the cheaper version, although if you can get the mana split personalities, you could probably do that. It pushes a little bit more mana than the other version. Other than that, there are virtually no changes to the Mana Guardian. Nothing was really impacted by the Manifesto. No nerfs. Anyways, moving on to the Culler. I've included some POBs here. This is going to be the ROA character that we play before we're culling. We had a lot of people ask how we're leveling the Culler. It's literally just a cookie cutter bow character. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I am going to include the POB for people that are interested or want to like play something similar. Literally just a really scuffed Wind Ripper, Sedima's Goldworm garbage. He has a Maryland's on because he's getting Destructive linked from an Aurabot, and that's giving him a 100% crit chance. This is a huge amount of damage. Thieves Torment for Giga survivability early. This should be very, very, very cookie cutter bow build. This probably won't be able to do more than like yellow maps, but that's really all we're doing it for. We're just kind of running around blasting low tier maps, doing various content to make money early on so that we can transition into our full blasting builds. Now, the Culler also didn't really see very many substantial changes from the Manifesto. The one thing that happened was actually it got buffed because we're taking suppression on the tree. As I said before, we're going to be getting a lot more suppression from just getting it on the tree, so you probably have to spend less points to get everything you were getting before. Now, the big thing to mention on the Culler is the importance of the Timeless Jewel. There are a lot of good seeds that have 3 Elegant Hubris Discerning Tastes, and getting that 3rd Discerning Taste is going to become more and more important. Now, unfortunately, the best spot to do this is not in this jewel socket. You can get 2 discerning tastes here in the elemental equilibrium cluster here. However, there does not exist 3 discerning tastes here. So you are going to need to look elsewhere, either in Duelist or in Shadow. It is very unfortunate if you do get one in Shadow because you are going to be deleting a lot of good nodes here. Additionally, you are going to be deleting a lot of good nodes if you get it in Ranger as well. So there isn't a really great place to put it besides Duelist, and also Witch. But the Witch area isn't really accessible until you are getting voices. So what you might want to consider early is just getting an Elegant Hubris and getting 2 of them in this Elemental Equilibrium spot. It's completely doable. You can save yourself a lot of costs and a lot of points, and then when you are able to spend a little bit more on the Culler, you can then get a 3 passive or even 4 passive Discerning Taste. Once again, I'm not going to give you specific seeds to look for because honestly what is available is going to be changing every league. However, using the Find Timeless Jewel feature here on POB is invaluable. You can look up Elegant Hubris. You can try and find good seeds. Make yourself a quick list. Anything with 3 Discerning Tastes is going to be acceptable. However, there are a handful of 4 Discerning Taste seeds that exist in Witch and in Shadow. Additionally, there is a single seed at Ghost Dance that has 4 Discerning Tastes. So just be on the lookout for those. It is probably like the end game last upgrade you'll do on the Culler. But other than that, the build has not changed a single bit. All the items are the same. All the itemization is the same. Also to go over quickly here is the miner support. Now, not much has changed directly with the miner support. However, the one thing that we mentioned before is going to be concerns for the tankiness of the Animate Guardian. Not really sure if the Grave Intentions alone is going to be able to keep it alive, especially with all the minion changes. The most important thing for the Animate Guardian to keep equipped is the Kingmaker because it's giving you rarity. If that fails, the best thing to do is to probably drop Venomous as well as your Cold Iron Point and Aegis and to put a Kingmaker on the mine support. The reason you drop Venomous is so you can bump up your ES pool with an actual chest piece. You could also probably get some suppression on it, make this character a little bit tankier because he is going to be wearing some garbage, including the Kingmaker. Keep in mind that's only really necessary if Animate Guardians turn out to be just dying over and over in the maps, and if that's the case, then you can look into equipping a Kingmaker on this character. Otherwise, literally nothing has changed. The reservation efficiency changes, of course, hit all of these builds, but once again, just dropping Defiance Banner, since it's nerfed anyways, just makes everything work as normal. That efficiency you lost is just coming in the form of dropping a nerfed Defiance Banner, and once again, everything fits. One last thing to go over here are 2 duo builds that you can use to either boss or do simulacrums. I've actually spent a lot more time going through these builds and making sure that they are actually like extremely precise on the POBs. In the past, I've tried to modify my Aurabot and carry POBs to try and make a duo build, and usually they're a little bit scuffed, but I've really gone ahead and made the effort to like make sure that these POBs are good and that these will be what you want to be playing in a duo. First things first, Spark is probably going to be your best bet for doing invitations as well as simulacrums. Obviously, the small arenas and being able to pre-lay all of your damage on the ground, casting Spark over and over, very conducive to make Spark the best skill in those particular encounters. So if you're planning on doing simulacrums or you're planning on doing bossing in invitations like Feared, Spark is probably a no-brainer. However, if you're probably planning on mapping in a duo, I would recommend going Stormcall, as you can abuse the Sextant, and Vaal Stormcall is super, super potent if you are able to abuse the Sextant being the Vaal Soul Gain Prevention Sextant. Now, as for the passive tree, it is very similar to traditional nebulous assassin trees. The DPS this is putting out on a duo is 276 million. The gear is obviously all uniques, so basically it's really fucking hard to fuck up the gear. The carry is super straightforward. There are a few adjustments, however, so let's get into it. First one is obviously putting on Nature's Patience instead of Interrogate. The reason for that is you could probably just get this on a Gale site. You can save a lot of money that way too. Gale Sight is maybe like an Exalt, maybe 2, depending on how early you get it, and that'll give you what you're after, which is the Brittle. It allows you to put on Nature's Patience, which is a pretty good damage increase. You basically stand still in the middle of an invitation or a simulacrum, cast a bunch of sparks, get them all pre-laid, and then spawn the encounter, and it is super good at like one-shotting the encounter as it's spawning. The clusters here are going to be Repeater Streamlined all around. This is probably the best cluster you can get here. The amount of prod speed and prod damage is going to be Biss for Spark. Your larges, you have a bit of choice here, so I've included 2 different ones. One of them is Arcane Heroism. This is a super good source of Arcane Surge on hit. You can save yourself a gem socket here. It also gives you effective Arcane Surge, which is a more damage multiplier, so this is a very good choice for your large. But honestly, you can kind of put whatever. You can even look into going like Snowstorm if your Aurabot can somehow manage to fit in Skitterbots so that you have the chill. Once again, this character is using a Maryland's Falcon, Fallacy, getting off of Badge, and then converting the Doomsday Keystone using a Militant Faith so that you don't have to have Frenzy Charge generation. If you're not familiar, it is really hard to generate Frenzy Charges, and it is almost always easier to get a Militant Faith, I think, and equip Inner Conviction so that you don't ever need to worry about generating Frenzy Charges in a boss encounter. As for the mods on the Militant Faith here, you can honestly get any that are relevant to you. I personally like Elemental Resistances. You can get flat elemental damage. Those are all very good stats. Effective non-damaging ailments is actually pretty good as well. Those are just a couple of the choices you can go with. Other than that, the tree itself should be pretty familiar here, especially if you've done any sort of Nebulous builds. One thing to mention here on the Nebulous is that a lot of people will look for double damage or multi on their Nebulous, but for a lot of cases, gain fire as extra chaos is going to be a much cheaper mod that you can get, and it'll actually give a very similar amount of damage to the other multi and double damage. Double damage is obviously better, but this is about 80% of the damage of a double damage Nebulous and probably 10% of the cost. Incandescent Heart is a no-brainer. Been using this for years. It is the best DPS chest that you can for a CI assassin. It is super good. One thing that you might not have seen before is Abhorrent Interrogation. I think that these gloves are super sleeper OP, super underutilized, and one of the best bossing and or simulacrum gloves that you can wear as a Nebulous carry. First part is it gives you an insane elemental damage buff. It also stacks Wither for you, and all of the chaos damage that you're doing is giving you all of that extra damage with all of that Wither stacks. It also removes the need to build for pen, and basically all you need to do is then cast a curse on the thing that you're killing, whether it's through gloves or if your Aurabot is casting it. This completely solves the pen problem and makes ascendancies like Inquisitor a lot less attractive. If you're bossing, I would wear Abhorrent Interrogation. If you're mapping in a duo, I would wear Asenath for the pops. Voidwalker for the pierce. This is a no-brainer. It's irreplaceable. 2 Collar Brotherhoods for the conversion, and a crystal belt with just some ES and some res, whatever you need here. So the target for this is to probably get 87 overcap on the Aurabot, and then you get +3 max res with a prismatic carapace as well as anointing prismatic skin, and that brings you straight to 90. Once again, the carry is only half of the puzzle. The other half is the Aurabot, and the adjustments you make in a duo are important here. There are a couple problems you need to solve playing a duo Aurabot, especially if you're bossing. The first problem you need to solve is obviously casting your blessing. As I talked about before, the best way to cast your blessing in a party is probably have somebody else cast Vaal Clarity for you. Obviously, in boss encounters, you don't have access to that. So the best way to cast your blessing in this case is to invest, once again, the flask so you can get reduced mana cost of skills, and then you get a little bit on the tree, as well as linking the zealotry to inspiration. This gives you enough reduced mana cost so that the blessing is completely free. Now, in a boss encounter, you probably need to manage your flasks a little bit and can be a little bit tedious at first. Practice a little bit, it's not too bad. One other thing here to make sure to include, especially if you have an Ashes, is to try and get a Rejuve totem. This is getting a gigantic buff, actually going to provide you a ton of life per second. Sustain is crucial in boss fights, and keep in mind that this 162 life per second is actually before Aura Effect. It is affected by Aura Effect. So if you're doing any sort of invitations or anything like that, try and include a rejuvenation totem. It is actually extremely good for sustain. Suppression is highly valued, especially if you're doing invitations, so its Zeri Step is an okay boot option that is super cheap. It also is a place where you can get +2 so that you can get your purities up to level 23. It's probably going to be much easier for you to get gloves with an unveil with +2. However, getting them on an Zeri Step corruption is not that out of this world. Just keep in mind you need +2 somewhere. It can come from your covenant, it can come from the gloves with a craft or a corruption, or it can be on the boots. Syntrex and its Zeri Step come to mind. However, if you get them on Syntrex, you're probably losing out on some suppression, and if you're bossing or doing invitations, you definitely want to try and get to 100% spell suppression. One of the realities you'll probably arrive to is that it's going to be very hard for you to get off of Covenant if you're going to be going bossing, and the reason for that is when you're playing a mapping Aurabot, you can put on Skyforths and get away with using Vaal Discipline as your source of sustain. However, if you're doing invitations or simulacrum, it's much harder to get away with that. So you're going to find it harder to transition to a Redeemer chess piece because I think it's a lot harder to get the RMR you need. So for the most part, I think stopping here, getting the suppression with 87 overcap is probably going to be a good spot for you to stop if you're going to be doing endgame content. The next step from here would probably be to go CI. If you're doing invitations or bossing, I would completely skip the phase in which you're using chorus skating and a Redeemer chest. It doesn't make much sense because that version doesn't work unless you have Skyforce, and using Skyforce in boss encounters is absolute pain for most people. So I would start with this version. This will probably clear all content if you need it to, and then if you want to invest more, you could probably go to CI with voices and small cluster jewels to fit in all of your auras. Some other adjustments here that differ from group Aurabotting versus duo Aurabotting is the addition of mine. Now, in a big group, when we have 6 people, we have a dedicated player that is being able to throw max effect portal mines to hit the effective minefield as well as Stormblast mine. However, for the addition of 0 mana, you can throw portal mines in a 3-link and give your carry 72% chance to deal double damage. For a lot of these encounters, you can actually pre-throw all of your mines and then have a big aura out that is basically giving your carry 72% chance to deal double damage. If you're not familiar with how this setup works, portal actually costs 0 mana, and if you link it to high impact mine, you get the effect of having the mines out and it doesn't reserve any mana. So it's actually completely free as long as you have the gem sockets. This does come at the expense of not being able to generosity your smite or your zealotry. You can fix the sockets here if you get unset rings. It's just a little tricky. But for the most part, if you need to drop a gem socket to fit in the portal mines, it's absolutely worth it. It is a no-brainer. You toss it out, you get a fuck ton of damage. It's absolutely free. Definitely something you should be doing if you're not doing it already in a duo. I just personally don't do it because I have another party member to do it for me. Those are some of the substantial changes you should be making when transitioning this build from a group Aurabot to a duo Aurabot. You want to make sure you can cast the blessing. You want to make sure you have a mine setup if possible, and you can get the sockets. You also want to try and get a curse setup. There are places that the carry can fit this in, but somewhere one of you needs to equip a pen curse, probably flammability, especially if you have Cold to Fire in your main damage links. You don't need to get any penetration, but one pen curse is good enough with Abhorrent Interrogation to solve all of your pen problems. If you're touching all those bases, you'll be great. Yeah, that should sum up the manifesto and kind of some of the adjustments that we've taken on some of these builds, as well as maybe give you some new ideas on where you want to take some high investment characters in group play. I realize this is still quite early. We haven't even had the live stream with all the new content. We also don't have the patch notes, obviously. If there are any substantial changes to any of the builds, I will make a follow-up video, but I did want to get this out early so people can start getting their friends together, whatever, get everybody grouped together, and I can make any adjustments later and update guides if I need to. Yeah, let's go over all the builds that we're planning on playing. Honestly, not much has changed, as you can see. Biggest change really was dropping frenzy charges so that we can click on the altar without having to read it, and our builds got a little bit more expensive just because we had to get a little bit of more efficiency. But other than that, not a ton changed, so we'll be smooth sailing in group play for 319. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave in the comments. I try to answer most people as long as it's a question I haven't gotten 100 times, so if you have any questions, please feel free. I try to respond to everybody. We'll be live streaming the reveal on Thursday, as well as we'll be streaming our league start, so you can catch me there. My Twitch channel is down in the description. And once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.